What if I told you that the search for hidden treasure has caused more destruction than most natural disasters? We're talking tunnels that collapsed entire villages, islands stripped bare, people dynamiting mountains, governments authorizing mass excavations, and divers dying in pitch-black lakes, all chasing gold that may never have existed. From a Nova Scotia hole that has swallowed millions of dollars and several human lives, to a live TV special that demolished a perfectly good building for absolutely nothing, humanity's obsession with hidden treasure has a dark, hilarious, and jaw-dropping price tag. These are 49 of the wildest treasure myths that led to massive, real-world destruction. And you will not believe how far people went. 1. Somewhere beneath a muddy pit on Oak Island in Nova Scotia lies a fortune so massive that people have been digging for over 200 years and found absolutely nothing worth the effort. Treasure hunters have flooded the shaft, collapsed tunnels, spent millions in equipment, and lost actual human lives chasing coins that may never have existed. Engineers, historians, and archaeologists have examined the site repeatedly. The most valuable thing ever recovered was a small piece of chain. The hole keeps winning, the treasure keeps hiding, the digging never stops. 2. Rosslyn Chapel in Scotland is secretly hiding an enormous vault of Knights Templar gold, buried somewhere beneath its ornate stone floor. Tourists arrive daily convinced the entire building is one elaborate treasure map waiting to be decoded. Historians have scanned the foundation, examined every carved symbol, and found zero evidence of any hidden chamber containing anything valuable. The chapel is genuinely beautiful and historically significant. It is not, however, sitting on top of a medieval gold deposit. Dan Brown wrote a very entertaining novel. Researchers confirmed it was fiction. The floor remains unimpressively empty underneath. 3. Somewhere in the Polish countryside, a secret Nazi train is buried inside a sealed tunnel, packed floor to ceiling with stolen gold, artwork, and wartime loot worth billions. 2 men announced in 2015 they had found it using ground-penetrating radar, and the entire world lost its mind immediately. Polish authorities mobilized, historians scrambled, excavation teams arrived with serious equipment. They dug extensively and found absolutely nothing resembling a treasure-filled train. The tunnel contained dirt, rocks, and profound disappointment. The train remains missing. The legend remains extremely profitable for local tourism. 4. Captain Kidd buried an absolutely enormous pirate fortune somewhere on Gardiner's Island in New York before his capture and execution in 1701. Treasure hunters have torn up beaches, privately owned land, and coastal properties across the northeastern United States chasing this buried cache for 3 centuries. Historians note that Kidd actually recovered most of his buried goods were already retrieved by colonial authorities before his trial and used as evidence against him. The treasure was essentially already found and confiscated centuries ago. Hunters kept digging anyway because hope is extraordinarily resistant to historical documentation. 5. Somewhere deep in the jungles of Colombia or Venezuela sits an entire city built from pure gold called El Dorado, stuffed with ancient indigenous riches beyond any modern calculation. Spanish conquistadors spent decades hacking through rainforest, destroying entire civilizations and killing thousands of people chasing a city that never physically existed. El Dorado originated as a ceremonial tradition where a chief covered himself in gold dust and made offerings into a lake. It was a ritual, not a real location. The jungle gave up nothing. The destruction left behind was catastrophically real and permanent. 6. Somewhere hidden inside the Superstition Mountains of Arizona sits a gold mine so rich it made one German immigrant a fortune in the 1800s and has gotten dozens of people killed trying to find it since. The lost Dutchman's gold mine has inspired over a century of expeditions, property disputes, illegal excavations, and mysterious disappearances across the Arizona desert. Geologists have surveyed the mountain range thoroughly and found no evidence of any significant gold deposit matching the legend. People still hike into those mountains every single year looking. The mountain has never once confirmed anything. 7. The actual crown worn by King Richard III during his reign is buried somewhere in England, hidden during the chaos following his defeat at Bosworth Field in 1485. Treasure hunters have torn through English countryside, excavated private farmland, and damaged historical sites across the Midlands region, searching for royal regalia that historians believe was most likely melted down or absorbed into the royal treasury immediately after the battle. Richard himself was found buried under a Leicester parking lot in 2012. His crown remains completely unaccounted for and probably no longer exists in any recoverable form. 8. The original Ark of the Covenant, the gold-covered chest containing the actual stone tablets of Moses, is currently sitting inside a small chapel in Axum, Ethiopia, guarded by a single monk who never leaves. Treasure hunters, archaeologists, foreign governments, and religious organizations have all attempted to verify or access this claim for decades. The guardian monk allows absolutely nobody inside under any circumstances whatsoever. Ethiopia maintains the Ark is real and present. Archaeologists maintain they cannot confirm anything they cannot examine. The world's most wanted religious artifact remains permanently behind a door that nobody is ever allowed to open. 9. Deep inside, Moaning Cavern in California, gold deposits worth millions are supposedly hidden in chambers that early miners never fully explored before abandoning the site entirely. Amateur treasure hunters have damaged cave formations, broken through protected geological structures, and illegally excavated sections of this natural landmark, chasing gold that professional geologists found no significant evidence of during multiple surveys. Cave formations take thousands of years to develop and cannot be replaced once destroyed. Several people required rescue operations after getting stuck in passages they had no business entering. The gold remains unconfirmed. The stalactites remain broken permanently. 10. Jesse James buried stolen loot worth millions across Oklahoma and surrounding states before his assassination in 1882, leaving behind an elaborate trail of maps, codes, and symbols carved into trees according to legend. Treasure hunters have dug up private farmland, damaged protected historical properties, and sparked serious legal disputes across multiple states following this trail. Historians note that Jesse James was famously broke at the time of his death, and his gang had suffered devastating losses for years before he died. The buried fortune mythology grew significantly after his death. The actual evidence for any buried cash remains essentially non-existent. 11. Rennes-le-Château is a tiny French village sitting directly on top of a secret treasure so enormous that a poor priest named Béranger Saunière suddenly became mysteriously wealthy in the 1890s, and nobody could explain it. Treasure hunters have torn apart the village church, damaged medieval stonework, excavated the graveyard, and destabilized ancient foundations searching for Templar gold, Cathar riches, and everything in between. Historians eventually traced the priest's wealth to a scheme selling fraudulent religious services through mail order catalogs across France. The treasure was a scam. The property damage to a genuinely historic village was completely real. 12. At the bottom of Lake Toplitz in the Austrian Alps lies an enormous stash of Nazi gold, stolen artwork, and secret wartime documents thrown into the water during the final chaotic days of the Third Reich. Divers have died attempting unauthorized searches in this extremely dangerous lake filled with submerged logs and low oxygen layers. Austrian authorities have conducted official searches and recovered printing plates for counterfeit British currency, and little else of significant value. The lake is genuinely treacherous and legally protected. The gold narrative keeps sending unprepared divers into water that has already killed multiple people chasing it. 13. Japanese General Yamashita buried an incomprehensible fortune in stolen Asian gold and wartime plunder somewhere across the Philippine Islands before his capture in 1945. This legend has consumed the Philippines for decades, inspiring thousands of illegal excavations that have collapsed homes, destabilized hillsides, swallowed entire properties, and killed diggers in tunnel collapses across multiple provinces. Historians largely agree Yamashita had neither the time nor resources to organize any systematic burial operation during a chaotic military retreat. The Philippine government has spent significant resources managing treasure hunting damage to infrastructure. The gold remains missing, while the sinkholes remain permanently. 14. Jean Lafitte, the legendary Louisiana pirate, buried an absolutely massive treasure somewhere along the Gulf Coast before disappearing from recorded history around 1823. Treasure hunters have excavated beaches, torn through protected Louisiana wetlands, damaged coastal ecosystems, and sparked property disputes across Texas and Louisiana following this legend for 2 centuries. Historians note that Lafitte was a sophisticated businessman who operated profitable smuggling and privateering networks, making random burial of his wealth in swamps deeply inconsistent with his known character and business practices. The wetlands got damaged anyway. The treasure remained completely unpersuaded to reveal itself. 15. Inca priests threw an unimaginable fortune in gold artifacts into Lake Titicaca to hide it from Spanish conquistadors, leaving billions in ancient treasure sitting on the lake bottom between Bolivia and Peru. Diving expeditions, underwater surveys, and remotely operated vehicles have searched the lake extensively over decades. Archaeologists have recovered genuinely significant ceremonial objects from the lake, confirming ritual offering practices. An entire hidden fortune worth billions remains completely unverified by any serious expedition. The lake is extremely deep and cold. The confirmed offerings were ceremonial items. The billion-dollar narrative was considerably more exciting than the actual archaeological evidence supported. 16. Confederate soldiers buried millions in gold somewhere near Danville, Virginia, during the final desperate days of the Civil War as Union forces closed in on the fleeing Confederate government in April 1865. Treasure hunters have excavated farmland, damaged Civil War historical sites, and torn through protected Virginia countryside for over a century following this story. Historians who studied the Confederate Treasury's final movements traced the remaining funds to documented disbursements to soldiers and government officials during the retreat. The money was spent, distributed, and accounted for across multiple locations. The buried cash mythology proved significantly more durable than the actual historical record suggested it deserved. 17. Spanish Armada ships sinking off Ireland and Scotland in 1588 carried an enormous fortune in gold and royal treasure that still sits scattered across the ocean floor waiting to be recovered. Salvage operations have located and explored multiple Armada wreck sites along the Irish and Scottish coastlines over decades. Professional marine archaeologists have confirmed that Armada ships carried military equipment, supplies, and personal belongings rather than any significant treasury shipment. Spain was not sending gold to invade England, they were sending soldiers and cannons. The romantic treasure narrative attached itself to the shipwrecks entirely, without historical justification, and has stubbornly refused to leave. 18. The Holy Lance that pierced Jesus Christ during the crucifixion carries supernatural power and was hidden somewhere near Antioch, making whoever possesses it completely unconquerable in battle. Multiple competing lances have been claimed as the authentic relic by different churches and governments across Europe for over 1,000 years. Heinrich Himmler allegedly became obsessed with acquiring one version for Nazi occult purposes. Historians note there are currently 4 separate objects all simultaneously claiming to be the one authentic spear. Mathematically, only one could possibly be genuine. Scientifically, the supernatural unconquerability claim has never once held up during actual warfare testing. 19. Al Capone secretly buried millions in cash and valuables somewhere beneath Chicago before his imprisonment in 1931, leaving a hidden fortune that his organization never recovered. In 1986, a television network broadcast a live special event opening what they claimed was Capone's secret vault discovered beneath a Chicago hotel. 30 million viewers watched simultaneously. Geraldo Rivera hosted the entire production with tremendous dramatic energy. Workers opened the vault on live national television and found dirt, empty bottles, and a stop sign. It remains one of the most watched disappointments in American broadcasting history. The treasure was never there. The embarrassment remains legendary. 20. Forrest Fenn, an art dealer and author from Santa Fe, claimed in 2010 that he buried a bronze chest filled with gold coins, rubies, emeralds, and diamonds somewhere in the Rocky Mountains, and published a poem containing cryptic clues to its location. Over a decade, approximately 350,000 people searched the wilderness following his poem. At least 5 searchers died during the hunt in remote mountain terrain. Countless others required search and rescue operations. Fenn announced in 2020 that someone had finally found the chest. The finder remained anonymous. The families of those who died searching never received any satisfying explanation for what the clues actually meant. 21. Glastonbury Abbey in England secretly holds the Holy Grail buried beneath its ruins, placed there by Joseph of Arimathea himself after carrying it directly from Jerusalem. Archaeologists have excavated Glastonbury extensively for decades and found genuinely significant medieval remains, but zero evidence of any hidden chamber containing sacred cups. The abbey was destroyed during Henry VIII's reign. Whatever was inside got looted centuries before modern treasure hunters arrived with metal detectors and enormous expectations. 22. The legendary Amber Room, a complete chamber decorated entirely in amber panels and gold, was stolen by Nazi forces from a Russian palace in 1941 and hidden somewhere near Kaliningrad before vanishing completely. Searchers have excavated bunkers, torn through former Nazi facilities, and damaged protected historical sites across the region for decades. Russian and German investigators have followed hundreds of leads without confirmed results. A reconstructed Amber Room now exists in St. Petersburg. The original remains missing and has generated significantly more property damage searching than its estimated value could ever justify. 23. Henry Morgan buried an enormous pirate fortune somewhere near Panama City after sacking the original settlement in 1671 before escaping with his fleet. Treasure hunters have excavated Panamanian coastline, damaged protected archaeological zones, and sparked legal disputes across Central America following this legend. Historians note Morgan was knighted by the British Crown shortly after the raid and lived openly wealthy in Jamaica until his death. He had no reason to secretly bury anything. The man retired comfortably above ground. The buried treasure mythology arrived considerably later than the actual historical evidence supported. 24. 7 enormous golden cities called the Cities of the Caesars are hidden somewhere deep in Patagonia, built by stranded Spanish survivors and filled with unimaginable riches waiting to be discovered. Spanish expeditions spent 2 centuries hacking through South American wilderness, killing thousands of indigenous people searching for cities that indigenous populations consistently said did not exist. Modern archaeological surveys of Patagonia found no evidence of any hidden colonial settlement containing gold. The indigenous people were correct the entire time. The expeditions were catastrophically destructive anyway. 25. The Iron Door mine in Arizona contains a cavern stuffed with Spanish gold so enormous that early explorers sealed it behind an iron door, and the location was subsequently lost forever. Treasure hunters have illegally excavated protected desert land, damaged Native American archaeological sites, and triggered multiple law enforcement interventions across Arizona searching for this entrance. The Arizona desert contains genuinely significant Native American heritage sites that sustained real damage from unauthorized digging. Professional geologists found no evidence matching the described deposit. The iron door has never appeared. The archaeological damage, unfortunately, has. 26. The Visigoth kings of Toledo buried an incomprehensible royal treasury somewhere beneath the Spanish city before fleeing the Moorish invasion in 711 AD. Treasure hunters and amateur archaeologists have damaged medieval foundations, excavated protected historical zones, and created dangerous subsidence beneath ancient Toledo streets searching for this cache. Our Spanish authorities have repeatedly intervened to stop unauthorized digging beneath a city that is itself an UNESCO World Heritage Site. Professional archaeologists found no confirmed evidence of any massive buried royal treasury. Toledo's foundations got damaged hunting for something that may never have existed underground. 27. The Philosopher's Stone, a legendary substance capable of turning ordinary metal into gold, was allegedly hidden somewhere beneath Prague by alchemists working for Emperor Rudolf II in the late 1500s. Treasure hunters have damaged medieval cellars, excavated protected Czech historical sites, and created serious structural risks beneath Prague's old town searching for a substance that chemistry conclusively proved cannot exist. Rudolf employed dozens of alchemists who collectively produced zero gold and considerable debt. The stone was never real. Prague's medieval foundations paid real prices for an imaginary substance. 28. The Brinks armored car robbery of 1950 in Boston netted robbers approximately $2.7 million, most of which was never recovered, and remains hidden somewhere accessible to this day. Treasure hunters and amateur investigators have torn apart Boston properties, excavated private land, and damaged buildings following leads connected to the original gang members for decades. The FBI recovered approximately half the stolen money during investigations. Most remaining gang members died before the statute of limitations expired without revealing locations. The rest likely got spent quietly over decades. The buried fortune mythology outlasted the actual missing money considerably. 29. Dutch Schultz buried an enormous criminal fortune estimated at $7 million somewhere in the Catskill Mountains of New York just before his assassination in 1935. Treasure hunters have excavated forests, damaged private properties, and sparked numerous trespassing incidents across the Catskill region for nearly 90 years following this story. Schultz was shot before revealing any location and died delirious. His lawyer claimed to have found partial evidence, but produced nothing verifiable. Professional investigators traced most Schultz assets to known criminal associates. The Catskill Mountains absorbed enormous amounts of unauthorized digging for a fortune that probably never made it there. 30. The copper scroll discovered near the Dead Sea in 1952 contains an actual ancient list of buried treasure locations describing gold and silver worth billions hidden across the Judean wilderness. Unlike other Dead Sea Scrolls, this one is engraved on actual copper, suggesting its contents were considered genuinely important. Archaeologists have investigated multiple listed locations and found nothing matching the described deposits. Scholars debate whether the scroll describes real treasure or symbolic religious accounting. Regardless, the discovery inspired decades of unauthorized excavation across protected Israeli archaeological sites, causing significant permanent damage to genuinely irreplaceable ancient history. 31. The Hungarian gold train carried an enormous fortune in Jewish confiscated wealth across Austria during the final days of World War II, before disappearing entirely from official records. Investigators, historians, and treasure hunters have searched Austrian countryside, excavated former railway depots, and filed international legal claims for decades. American forces actually intercepted the train in 1945, and the assets were largely misappropriated rather than mysteriously buried. Courts eventually settled partial claims decades later. The treasure was not hidden underground. It was stolen twice by two different governments consecutively. 32. Black Sam Bellamy's pirate ship, the Wida, sank off Cape Cod in 1717, carrying an enormous accumulated pirate fortune from over 50 captured vessels. Treasure hunters damaged protected Massachusetts coastal areas for centuries before explorer Barry Clifford legally located the wreck in 1984. The Wida has since yielded genuinely significant artifacts and confirmed pirate treasure through proper archaeological excavation. This is arguably a treasure hunt that actually worked. The damage came from 2 centuries of unauthorized searching before the legitimate discovery. The lesson arrived considerably later than the destruction unfortunately did. 33. King Solomon operated mines of incomprehensible wealth somewhere in Zimbabwe or Mozambique, leaving behind ancient gold extraction operations that inspired one of history's most destructive treasure hunting obsessions. Cecil Rhodes used the Solomon's Mines legend to justify the colonial invasion and exploitation of Zimbabwe in the 1890s. Archaeologists confirmed the Great Zimbabwe ruins were built by indigenous Shona people representing sophisticated local civilization. The Solomon connection was entirely fabricated to delegitimize African achievement. The colonial destruction that followed the myth caused generational damage no treasure discovery could ever remedy or justify. 34. A secret cave in Egypt contains the original manuscript of the Gospel of Judas alongside an enormous treasure cache hidden by early Christian communities fleeing Roman persecution. The actual Gospel of Judas manuscript surfaced through antiquities black markets in the 1970s and suffered severe physical deterioration from decades of improper storage and multiple illegal sales. Scholars eventually reassembled and translated the damaged document. The treasure cave origin story helped justify extensive illegal excavation across Egyptian archaeological sites. The manuscript barely survived. Countless irreplaceable ancient sites got damaged hunting for a cache that never materialized. 35. Victorio Peak in New Mexico contains an enormous cave stuffed with Spanish gold bars, religious artifacts, and possibly United States government treasure hidden and subsequently covered up by military authorities at White Sands Missile Range. The site sits inside an active military installation, making verification essentially impossible, which naturally made the conspiracy theories significantly more elaborate over decades. Official investigations found no credible evidence of any significant treasure deposit. The military restriction fueled rather than discouraged treasure hunting obsession. The inaccessibility became the proof for believers. The gold remained permanently unconfirmed inside a missile range. 36. The Treasure of Lima, an enormous collection of gold religious artifacts loaded onto a ship in 1820 to protect it from revolution, was stolen by the captain and buried somewhere on Cocos Island off Costa Rica. Over 300 documented expeditions have torn apart this remote island ecosystem over 2 centuries searching for this cache. Costa Rica eventually designated Cocos Island a national park specifically to protect it from continued treasure hunting destruction. The island's unique ecosystem sustained significant damage before protections arrived. No treasure was ever found. The biodiversity lost during the search cannot be recovered or replaced. 37. Australian Prime Minister Harold Holt secretly accumulated offshore gold reserves hidden somewhere accessible only to him before mysteriously disappearing while swimming in 1967. This theory emerged partly because his body was never recovered, fueling elaborate conspiracy theories about faked deaths, Chinese submarines, and hidden fortunes for decades. Australian authorities conducted one of the country's largest search operations at the time. Holt most likely drowned in rough surf, as witnesses reported. No offshore gold cache was ever identified or documented. The disappearance was a tragedy. The treasure mythology was an entirely separate invention attached afterward. 38. The Spanish galleon Atocha sank off Florida in 1622, carrying an enormous registered treasure, but a significant overflow cache was secretly offloaded before sinking and hidden somewhere along the Florida coastline. treasure hunter Mel Fisher spent 16 years legally searching for the Titicaca wreck and recovered genuinely extraordinary amounts of gold and silver after finally locating it in 1985. The overflow cache theory emerged afterward and inspired extensive illegal excavation along protected Florida coastline. Fisher's legitimate discovery was remarkable. The secondary mythology it spawned caused considerable damage to protected marine archaeological zones nobody had legal permission to touch. 39. The Bell Witch Cave system in Tennessee contains a buried treasure hidden by the Bell family during the famous haunting of the 1800s. Protected by supernatural forces that have injured every serious searcher who attempted retrieval. Treasure hunters have damaged the cave system, excavated surrounding farmland, and trespassed extensively across Robertson County, Tennessee, following this legend. The Bell Witch story originated as regional folklore documented generations after the alleged events. Professional geologists found no evidence of any significant buried cache inside the cave system. The supernatural injury claims proved self-fulfilling, mostly because cave exploration without proper equipment injures people regardless of ghost involvement. 40. The Atocha's registered manifest confirmed enormous wealth, but persistent legends claim additional, unregistered treasure was deliberately hidden throughout the Florida Keys before the storm hit. Marine archaeologists have documented the Atocha site carefully since Fisher's discovery. Unauthorized divers have damaged the protected wreck site repeatedly despite legal protections and active law enforcement monitoring. Spanish colonial ships routinely carried unregistered cargo to avoid taxation, making the theory historically plausible enough to inspire continuous illegal diving. The confirmed treasure Fisher recovered was extraordinary enough, when the unregistered cache remains unproven. The protected wreck site keeps getting damaged by people who cannot accept that enough. 41. The Lost Adams diggings in New Mexico contains a canyon stuffed with pure gold nuggets so abundant that an 1860s frontiersman named Adams allegedly scooped them from a stream before being chased out by Apache warriors and never finding the location again. Hundreds of expeditions have damaged protected New Mexico wilderness, disturbed Native American sacred lands, and triggered multiple legal interventions searching for a canyon Adams himself could never relocate. Professional geologists found no matching geological formation. The story grew more elaborate with every retelling. The sacred lands got damaged regardless of whether the gold existed. 42. The Nibelung Horde, an enormous legendary Germanic treasure thrown into the Rhine River by the Nibelung kings, sits somewhere on the riverbed waiting for the right person to retrieve it. This legend inspired Richard Wagner's entire 4-opera ring cycle and centuries of Rhine riverbed excavation attempts. Professional underwater archaeologists have surveyed significant portions of the Rhine without finding any evidence of a massive ancient treasure deposit. Medieval Germans apparently took their fiction extremely seriously. The Rhine got extensively disturbed. Wagner got a career. The treasure existed exclusively inside one of history's most elaborate pieces of literary mythology. 43. Somewhere beneath the Scottish countryside surrounding Rosslyn Chapel, additional Templar treasures beyond the main vault were buried in a network of tunnels stretching across multiple properties. This secondary theory emerged after investigators found nothing in the primary chapel search and needed geographical expansion to keep the legend alive. Property owners across Midlothian, Scotland have reported unauthorized excavations, damaged fencing, destabilized ground, and trespassing incidents connected to treasure hunters following this expanded theory. The Scottish countryside absorbed considerable damage hunting for a secondary treasure attached to a primary treasure that itself was never confirmed to exist anywhere. 44. Frederick Barbarossa's imperial treasury was hidden somewhere in the German countryside before his mysterious drowning in 1190 during the Third Crusade, leaving behind an enormous royal fortune that his successors never fully recovered. Amateur treasure hunters have excavated protected German historical sites, damaged medieval ruins, and triggered heritage protection interventions across southern Germany following various versions of this legend. Professional historians documented Barbarossa's treasury passing through normal imperial succession channels after his death. The fortune was administered, distributed, and accounted for through standard medieval royal processes. The buried cash mythology emerged significantly later than the actual historical record justified. 45. Prester John, a legendary Christian king ruling an impossibly wealthy kingdom somewhere in Ethiopia or Central Asia, accumulated treasure so vast that European crusaders spent centuries trying to locate his kingdom for financial alliance. Portuguese explorers damaged East African coastal communities, disrupted Central Asian trade routes, and funded disastrous expeditions across 2 continents searching for a kingdom that never existed. Prester John was a medieval European fictional construct possibly inspired by distorted accounts of real Eastern Christian communities. The treasure was imaginary. The destruction caused by expeditions chasing the fiction across real inhabited territories was devastatingly concrete. 46. The 7 cities of Cibola in the American Southwest contained streets literally paved with gold according to Spanish colonial accounts, inspiring Francisco Coronado's catastrophic 1540 expedition through the entire American Southwest. Coronado's forces damaged indigenous communities, destroyed settlements, massacred populations, and consumed enormous Spanish treasury resources, marching through what is now Arizona, New Mexico, Kansas, and Texas. The cities turned out to be ordinary Zuni pueblos containing no gold whatsoever. The indigenous people who described golden cities were likely providing deliberately misleading directions. It worked magnificently. Coronado found nothing. The devastation he left behind was irreversible. 47. The Iron Door Mine's sealed entrance is actually located on protected Apache sacred land in Arizona, and multiple indigenous oral histories describe Spanish miners being deliberately driven away from the location permanently. Treasure hunters have not only damaged protected desert archaeological sites, but have repeatedly violated federal laws protecting Native American sacred lands, pursuing this legend. The Apache communities whose ancestors allegedly sealed the mine have consistently requested that searching stop entirely out of respect for sacred territory. The requests get ignored consistently. The unauthorized excavations continue consistently. The federal violations accumulate consistently. The gold remains as absent as it has always been. 48. Yamashita's gold in the Philippines inspired Ferdinand Marcos to authorize secret government excavation operations across multiple Philippine provinces during his dictatorship, using state resources and military personnel to chase the legend officially. Marcos allegedly recovered significant amounts and secretly deposited them in Swiss bank accounts, which became central to corruption investigations after his overthrow in 1986. Swiss courts eventually froze significant Marcos assets, whether any came from actual Yamashita treasure or simply from decades of kleptocracy remains legally disputed. The excavations damaged communities, the corruption damaged an entire nation. The gold's origin never got definitively answered in any courtroom. 49. Cocos Island off Costa Rica has absorbed over 300 treasure hunting expeditions across 2 centuries, making it statistically the most repeatedly searched treasure location on Earth without a single confirmed significant discovery. Costa Rica designated the island a UNESCO World Heritage Site and National Park, specifically because treasure hunting expeditions were systematically destroying one of the world's most biodiverse and scientifically irreplaceable island ecosystems. The treasure of Lima may or may not be buried there. The unique species found nowhere else on Earth that got destroyed during 2 centuries of digging are gone regardless of whether anyone ever finds a single gold coin underneath. And that is 49 treasure legends that collectively caused more destruction than most natural disasters, and still found absolutely nothing. Humanity has flooded caves, invaded countries, destroyed ecosystems, and accidentally started wars over holes in the ground. If you enjoyed watching centuries of gloriously stubborn optimism meet brutal, disappointing reality, smash that like button and subscribe to BrainFumble for more weekly chaos. Hit the bell so you never miss an episode. Now tell us in the comments, which of these treasure hunts would you personally still attempt anyway?